Wes Anderson, every turtleneck-wearing, Letterboxd-using indie kid's favorite director. Whether you hate him or you love him, you have to admit that he has an iconic style. He has also made many films that lots of people love and appreciate, myself included. Since 1996, he has made 11 feature-length films, all of which I'm going to rank today. Do keep in mind that this list is my personal opinion, so if you disagree, feel free to argue with me in the comments. Also for this list, I'll be using the Letterboxd ranking system of 5 stars, since that seems to be the most universal among film nerds. Also follow my Letterboxd if you want, it'll be in the description. Without further ado, let's kick it off with his worst film. Bottle Rocket is Wes Anderson's 1996 first feature film debut. It's about 3 friends who plan to pull off a simple robbery and go on the run. I wasn't expecting this movie to be as fun and weird as it was. Oftentimes, directors' first films can be a pain to watch since they are usually very low budget and have a lot of mistakes, but this film was a pretty painless watch. It still has a lot of mistakes, but it also has a lot of great character moments and quirky comedy. I have to commend this film for being as weird as it is, and not being afraid to be itself. Although Wes Anderson's visual style has changed a lot throughout the years since this film, you can still see that he writes his dialogue and characters pretty much the same. The plot is very unfocused, but that kind of adds to the charm of this film. Although I'm putting it at the very bottom of the list, that doesn't mean it's a bad film in any way. It just shows how much Anderson has improved as both a director and a writer. I was pleasantly surprised by this film and I give it 3.5 stars. Isle of Dogs is the 2018 stop-motion animated feature that follows a young boy's odyssey across the Isle of Dogs in search of his long-lost pet. I'll be honest, this movie was pretty forgettable when it was stacked up against the rest of Anderson's filmography. It's a perfectly fine movie, but it didn't hook me as much as these other films on the list. I think this is due to the characters in Isle of Dogs. They are not very memorable, and they don't have the emotional weight that other protagonists in this list do. The relationship between the main boy and the Bryan Cranston dog was pretty sweet and the highlight of the film. But beyond that, the rest of the characters were pretty underwhelming. Particularly the whole side plot with Greta Gerwig's character, which felt very inconsequential and boring. Whenever those scenes were on screen, I was just waiting for us to return to the Dog Island, where all the cool stuff was happening. Also, the Chief and Nutmeg romance was very forgettable, as I totally forgot about it until I rewatched the film for this video. Even though I have my problems with the movie, it is still really good and a fun watch. The animation is beautiful, the comedy mostly works, and the world building is really interesting. 3.5 stars. The French Dispatch is a 2021 anthology film by Wes Anderson. The logline is as follows. A love letter to journalists set in an outpost of an American newspaper in a fictional 20th century French city that brings to life a collection of stories published in the French Dispatch magazine. I'll be honest, I'd never really loved this film, but I always appreciated it. I hate to say this word since it has a bad connotation to it, but I think the French Dispatch is pretty pretentious. Someone calling a Wes Anderson film pretentious? I know, revolutionary thought. But in my opinion, this is the film that truly deserves that stamp. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film in a way, as there are still a lot of great aspects to it. It's hard to judge this film amongst the other on this list since it's an anthology film that includes several different stories rather than one full narrative. But I think the way that this movie ties all the stories together was done really well and pretty seamlessly. Jeffrey Wright and Timothée Chalamet are by far my favorite characters in this movie and give the best performances. I appreciate how the use of color was used sparingly to give it more impact, and there's a lot of cool themes and messages to dive into with the film. I rate it 3.5 stars. Rushmore is Wes Anderson's 1998 film that follows a teenager at Rushmore Academy who falls for a much older teacher and befriends a middle-aged industrialist. Later, he finds out that his love interest and his friend are having an affair, which prompts him to begin a vendetta. This is a pretty solid film, and I feel like it's the most overlooked since it doesn't have a lot of the hallmarks and the visual style of a common Wes Anderson film. Although I still have a few gripes which hold it back for me personally. My main problem with this movie is the pace. It doesn't have very much forward momentum and moves pretty slowly, particularly the second act, which is a bit of a slog. Also, the main character is pretty hard to root for at some points, but that just makes his character arc even sweeter. It hits all the emotional beats really well and has some great character moments. Watching this movie reminded me that Bill Murray is actually a good actor, since he's been phoning it in Hollywood for the past 10 years. He's great in this movie along with the rest of the cast, great performances all around. This film has my favorite ending to any Wes Anderson movie, so I have to give it that. But overall, it's not his best work in my opinion, and it didn't resonate with me personally. So that's why I have it closer to the bottom of the list compared to a lot of other people's rankings. It's a high 3.5 stars from me. Now we are on to the next tier with all the movies that I think are 4 stars. Just warning you, the next 4 are pretty interchangeable in my book, as I love them all equally and had a hard time placing them. So the ranking of this tier can fluctuate a lot depending how I'm feeling on a certain day. Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou is Anderson's 2004 film. The logline is as follows. With a plan to exact revenge on a legendary shark that killed his partner, oceanographer Steve Zissou rallies a crew that includes his estranged wife, a journalist, and a man who may or may not be his son. For me, this film takes the place as both Wes Anderson's funniest film, but also one of his most depressing films. The relationship between Steve and his son is the heart of this story and what keeps me engaged throughout the film, and the scene with the shark at the end tied up Steve's character arc very nicely. The supporting character performances in this film are perfect, specifically Willem Dafoe and Jeff Goldblum, who have really interesting characters who I wish we could have seen more of. Also, as is the case with each film on the list, the soundtrack is phenomenal, and I love the David Bowie covers, who is one of my favorite artists of all time. A really great movie and a solid 4 stars. Moonrise Kingdom is the 2012 film about two 12-year-olds who live on an island who fall in love with each other and elope into the wilderness. While people set out on a search mission, a violent storm approaching them catches their attention. As is the case with a lot of people, this was the first Wes Anderson film I ever watched, as it's a great introduction to his filmmaking style. It has all the quirky, weird bits you find in his movies, but it still has a great story and characters that are lovable and easy to follow. If you wanted to introduce someone to Wes Anderson, I feel like this movie is the best one, since it's pretty accessible and not too far out there as much as like Asteroid City or The French Dispatch. This is a really solid film. It has a great production design and cinematography and a very charming story. The only gripe I have with this film is often the monotone line delivery can be a bit too much. I know it's Wes Anderson's iconic style, but I feel like it often kills the emotion of a scene a lot in this film. In movies like Life Aquatic, that type of line delivery works for the characters, but in this movie, I felt like it can be a bit too much at points. 4 stars. Asteroid City is Wes Anderson's most recent film, having come out in 2023. The logline is as follows. Following a writer on his world-famous fictional play about a grieving father who travels with his tech-obsessed family to a small rural asteroid city to compete in a junior stargazing event, only to have his worldview disrupted forever. This film is so Wes Anderson that it often feels like a Wes Anderson parody. There's a lot of things happening in this film and most of them work. This is a film about everything and nothing at all, so it can feel very jumbled at times, trying to tackle so many different themes and messages. However, I thought how they brought it all together in the end was very cool, and I dug the overall message of the film. The framing device of the main story being a play that's being performed worked really well at points, but others it felt like it killed the momentum of the story. You also have a hard time getting attached to the main characters through this lens, because the film is basically asking you to care about the actor's character within the play, and also care about the actor's character outside of the play. When the character is pulled in these two different directions, it often results in the audience not getting attached to either one. The cinematography, set design, and costumes were spot on, as always. The cast felt a little distracting at times because you're basically going, wait, I know that guy, the entire time. Overall, a solid film, but not for everyone. 4 stars. The Darjeeling Limited came out in 2007 and follows 3 brothers who travel across India by train and attempt to bond with each other after the passing of their father. This movie feels pretty toned down compared to a lot of other Wes Anderson films. It still has all his quirks, but it's not so in your face about it, which was a great change of pace because some of his later films get pretty self-indulgent. This is a movie about grief and loss, and using the trip across India in the train was a really good framing device and backdrop. If there's 2 things Wes Anderson does well, it's needle drops and writing broken family dynamics, because this film is a masterclass in both. The use of the Kinks music in this film is probably my favorite of his filmography, and represents the themes of the film perfectly. I wasn't really digging this movie in the beginning, as it's pretty slow to start, but right around the midpoint something big happened, and the movie finally clicked for me. This could be considered his most underrated film, as I often see this one at the bottom of people's list when they rank Wes Anderson films. If you haven't seen this one, I highly recommend it. 4 stars. The Royal Tenenbaums is Anderson's 2001 film about eccentric members of a dysfunctional family who reluctantly gather under the same roof for various reasons. This took the spot as my favorite Wes Anderson film for a long time. This movie is definitely the most emotional out of Anderson's filmography, at least to me. This was still in the era where he allowed his actors to use real emotion rather than delivering every line deadpan, so I felt like it was easier to relate to the characters' emotional arcs. I love this film, and it has some of the most interesting characters out of any movie in Anderson's catalog, and some very powerful scenes. My only gripe is that there's about 2 or 3 too many characters, so the film feels overstuffed at points. This is yet another movie that has a perfect soundtrack. The music choices in this film do a great job at saying what the characters are feeling in a scene, so that the characters don't have to say it themselves. 4.5 stars. The Grand Budapest Hotel is Wes Anderson's 2014 film. The logline is as follows. A writer encounters the owner of an aging high-class hotel, who tells him of his early years serving as a lobby boy in the hotel's glorious years under an exceptional concierge. In preparation for this video, this was my first rewatch of this film in a long time, and I forgot how great this movie is. It's Wes Anderson's most popular film, so naturally a lot of people will claim it's overrated and overhyped. But I think it deserves the praise. The pace in this film is amazing, as not a single second or line of dialogue is wasted. It makes for such an easy watch, as that hour and 39 minutes just fly by. Gustav is such a fascinating character and is brilliantly brought to life by Ralph Fiennes. This is the role that he was born to play, as I can't see anyone else try and portray this character. He brings so much comedy to the film, but also plays the character with a level of vulnerability and sincerity that sneaks up on you. And of course, the production design is amazing and works perfectly for the world of the film without feeling overdone. This is a fantastic movie and worthy of 5 stars. Finally, the best Wes Anderson film in my opinion is Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fantastic Mr. Fox is a 2009 animated film about an urban fox who cannot resist returning to his farm-raiding ways, who must then help his community survive the farmers' retaliation. Anyone who does not like this movie is either dumb or hates fun. I'm looking at you, Deborah Ross. Not only is this a perfect kids movie, but it's also just a perfect movie. The comedy is hilarious, the stop-motion animation is beautiful, and the characters are rich with personality. I can't sing this movie's praises enough, so I won't. If you want to know what I think, just watch Carson Runquist's video on it. I agree with everything he says. 5 stars. So that's my list. What does your list look like? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This has been Tom from Eisenheart Productions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.